All right. So what we want to do is this first, everyone find out what is your regret situation and go to that place where you're like, oh, why did I do that? The one last night is why did I dance so hard and now my back is all screwed up, or I've endangered my osteoporosis and maybe I'll have a fracture now. That was the work, or she was really beating herself up, even though she had a wonderful time dancing. So think of your situation. And Cindy, we want to really boil it down, and we don't need very much detail. We want to boil it down to what you wish you had done differently. We don't want anything about other people in here or what they did or said or thought. This one is about those times when we are hard on ourselves. So can you, in these number of books that I have about this, there are a lot of reasons we go into regret. It's like we're going along doing the best we can, and then a fear comes in and we're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, or somebody reacts, or the outcome doesn't go the way we want. And then we start beating ourselves up. So find that one of those moments. There may be more than one, but we'll just pick one where you wish you had done something differently. Where do you go into regret hell and go, oh, I wish I hadn't blank, or I wish I had? What's a moment of regret?
Well, I am feeling that every day, but especially a lot today. Something else has happened. And I just feel like if I would have made better choices, that I wouldn't maybe have some of the uh, number of
Right.
issues that I have.
And
Does that
I'm
make
like,
sense?
I started to say before you got on, and I want to say it again. It's really challenging in some ways because there's a lot going on, and I may seem stern to people out there, but I'm gonna hold you really strictly into working on
Okay.
one thing. So what is
Okay.
one choice you regret? And you don't need to give us private details. Just when you think of all those things you wish you had done differently, we can't get hold of that. I wish I had done a lot of things differently. We need to bring it down to one thing.
Okay. Um, One of many regrets, but I think the one that could have changed things, is that if I would have expected confirmation from my last attorney that he accepted the settlement, uh, which was a few days before the company filed bankruptcy. And that right there has been the catalyst of all my financial issues.
Right. And since you are talking about it, I'll give just enough background that she was pretty far along in a big lawsuit where she was going to get lots of damages for something she felt strongly she'd get, and had paid the lawyer a lot, or was going anyway, some, and then the company went bankrupt. So not only did she not get the settlement from the company, but the lawyer is billing her hugely with a lot of interest too. And so there are turning points where you could not have necessarily known what was going to happen, but maybe you had some warning signals. It seems that the company was potentially going bankrupt, and you wanted to accept the settlement beforehand. And it sounds like, is that what's going on?
Yes, it wasn't it was unpaid wages. So this money was money I earned at work, and there's a law that says companies have to pay. So I had the law on my side, just the longevity of it and the greediness of this, I call greediness of this final attorney. He wanted to take the case to court despite being told that the parent company we had the lawsuit against, that didn't pay me hundreds of thousands of dollars, that they were filing Chapter 11. He said, no, 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 we're not going to do that. And I said, we have to do it. This is my last chance. We don't have much time. And he just, just kept ignoring me. And so my regret is that maybe had I really forced it and said, we need to do this, you please confirm with me. And I think that would
Right.
have really
Okay.
made a
And I
change.
can imagine, I mean, now that we have heard enough about your situation, it is heartbreaking. It would be so hard to really get past that. And since he doesn't seem to agree with you that he was, whether that was malpractice on his
Yeah.
part or what, you don't necessarily want to go into trying to,
Well, and
tackle him. So we're coming back to, I know it could go off that way, but the idea
no, but
of
Shawn, the regret really comes from the fact that not only did I lose over 300,000 that I was not paid, but I paid out 400,000 to challenge this injustice. So I was already below. I spent all my, most of my retirement and my paychecks,
so I mean,
totally
any of us
paid.
can
And
imagine.
then,
Yeah. So, okay. And so how, horrible that would be for anybody in that situation to not only not get the money back, but to have already spent that much and then still being charged more ongoing now and
right,
not being able to get back on your feet in your life. Really, that whole lawsuit, the point of that in some ways was to get back on your feet from the thing that happened where the wages weren't paid. Anyway, so that's, this is a big one. We got a live one. So you go back to this is funny because if you did something, everybody, you can often see what you did and you can go, oh, in that moment, I wish I hadn't said that. And that's really clear and easy to work that moment of, well, what was I thinking and believing when I said that thing? And we had something like that last night where she did something and she was like, well, I was having a great time and I felt good and I didn't think I was hurting myself. And she was able to really go back and see who she was in that moment. When you have like this, where it's a not doing of something, and then a lot of times that is what we regret more than the doing, is we often beat ourselves up for not doing something. And then there's all the moments that you didn't do it. So it's kind of tricky. Can you settle on any one moment? You could, but let's just think around that time you had told him, no, I want to do it, and he's like, no, we want to keep going on this, we're not giving up. And then but you, maybe I'm mischaracterizing it, but let's not get too much into details, but that you didn't go back and say, no, I want this and I need you to confirm that you have accepted their offer. So you
right,
basically, in general, that you didn't do that. So the
right.
first
I
question,
should have done that.
everybody, what?
I should have done that. Exactly.
Right.
That one
That should
thing.
have story. I mean, I totally grew up with the should have story. So you should have done it. And we could do the, is it true? Can I absolutely know it's true? That's the work part of it. But really what we want to do is come back and see who you were. So I think I do this like two fingers. Here's the you that you are now. And we're going to go back and stand with, by, and for the you that you were then. As we talked last night too about hindsight, how cruel it is for us to use hindsight to beat ourselves up. I mean, it must have been shocking when you heard that they went bankrupt and you were not going to get a cent, plus you still owed. And so then we use that to go back and relive and wish we had done it differently. And we're so cruel to ourselves. It's, for me, it was like a stabbing. I would always feel it in my stomach and I just kept reliving it. And here you are 2 years later, maybe, and it's still hard to get
Six,
past it.
six.
Okay.
It all
So,
started 2018.
right. But the moment
Oh,
when you did decide, when you
oh,
didn't act,
that 11 months ago.
right. So about when I met you and you were telling me, so
Yeah.
so anyway, All right, so go back. Who were you in that little period of time when you knew that what were you thinking? So that's question one. And in the wheel, question one is at the top. What was I thinking? And the outcome is you find your own innocence and forgive yourself. So what were you thinking when that happened?
I was thinking that my attorney, I'm paying this attorney because he knows what is best and he will act on my best behalf.
Right. So
I
given
mean, I
that,
had a lot of, I had many thoughts, but that was really the thought that, I felt comforted that, I've been paying somebody who is handling this for me. And so I trusted him.
right?
I
So that
trusted
was
that he
you.
was going to do
That's what
that.
you were thinking and believing. You trusted him. You had hired him. You had paid him a lot of money. You thought, well, who am I to make this decision? He's the professional. So what is it going to
Right.
take for you to forgive that you? I mean, life shows up as life shows up. And it's so unfair to these little parts of ourselves where we feel that self-hatred, that regret in our bodies. Got to get to the point where you go, wow, given what I was believing, of course, that was the lens I was looking through. I couldn't have done it any other way.
That's how I felt. I didn't really, I think I had
Right.
expended all my options. He was my fourth attorney, and this was going on the fifth year
Right.
of this.
So without going into detail, can you see that you were innocent? You didn't, and by the way, for people who have even done or said something kind of nasty, we still get into finding what I call the spark of self-love, the motives beneath what you were doing. So in this case, we always find the spark of self-love. What were you thinking and believing? Spark of self-love is always about helping yourself or helping someone else. It can be the spark of love, the spark of self-love. You were doing the best you could to help yourself in that moment with the best knowledge that you had.
Right.
So again, even if you find a situation where you yelled at somebody and you said something really mean to them, or you even did it on purpose, you did something to kind of retaliate, and you feel, yeah, but I was mean when I did that. I did it on purpose. How can I forgive myself? You still, out of the lens you were looking through, you were still innocent, because that was you. Who else is there? Who else is there that is supposed to take care of us and save us except ourselves? So if
Right.
the lens you're looking through says, I'm in the presence of the enemy, I need to do something to take care of myself, I even need to attack back, you can still see that in that moment, you can stand with, by, and for yourself, the you that you were there. It is so unfair to go back. So in your situation, you weren't volitionally doing something retaliatory or mean. You just were trying to help yourself and maybe help anybody else that you owed money to. You were just saying, I don't have a crystal ball, but I've hired this guy. He's the expert.
Exactly. And
Okay,
so,
so what is it that can you forgive yourself then? And we're going to work
oh,
on the
yes,
fear.
I,
So
I
then
can,
if you can forgive yourself, then what are we doing this work for?
because I think, I think maybe it goes deeper than forgiveness. I think forgiveness doesn't take away the financial issues that still plague me. I
Okay,
know in
so
my heart.
that'll take us right to step two. So step one, and by the way, this is all written up so much more in the full Wheel of Self-Love on my website. Um, it's something, that's been out there, downloaded by tens of thousands of people, and we're, it's I'm giving you sort of the cheat sheet here, just the what was I thinking, forgive yourself. But if you want to know the how part, you would go on my website and just get that little book. It's It's $9.95. I hope that it will really help. It's just life-changing. So anyway, forgive yourself and support the you that was doing the best you could. If you feel like you're there, then we'll move to step 2. Do you feel like you
Well,
can see, you can
you
stand
know,
with, by, and for the you that you were then?
I don't know. I don't know because I can't say 100% that I have forgiven myself, because even today, I was getting ready to get in the shower and I'm thinking how I can't make any decisions because I think what I'm doing is good and right, but yet it turns into a total mess in my life. And then any decisions that come after. And it's like, do I,
Right. And so
I hope
maybe,
I don't need
maybe,
people to make
and
decisions for me.
in some ways that was me too. I was so caught in this loop of regret hell, which is in some ways a grandiose position. It believes that somehow you're in charge of life, and that if you would just make the right decision, then all this other stuff would go well. And
Well, I also feel like why do I get myself into these situations where
right.
I
So
end up a victim?
right. And we're, we're working on that in a bigger way, or we're about to get started working on that. But just even that story ties into a story that here's the bad, wrong outcome. And because that happened, now I have to blame myself. And now here's bad, wrong outcome on top of bad, wrong outcome. So first, you can move into action. But when we do regret how we're living our life in the rearview mirror, I actually, in some ways, couldn't just feel my feelings and then make clear decisions about how to move forward, because I kept going back and wishing it had been different.
Yeah,
And I know you have some very big, very tangible situations where a decision was made, and yet you will be able to get the gifts out of those. Something is getting woken up in you that wants you to pay more attention to something, and you'll be able to work, the thing that happened, another financial thing that we both know about,
right. And that's
to
an
start,
offshoot of it.
and
That
that was
that
an
was an
offshoot
offshoot.
of trying to recover from this.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
but and again, in some cases, could you have known? Maybe the bottom line is that no matter what, that self-solidarity, where you get to the place where, you know what, I don't care whatever outcome, I am not going to bring more suffering into the world by beating myself up. I cannot change it by going back and beating myself up. I can take responsibility for the consequences. I can make amends to others, but beating ourselves up doesn't really improve us. It just tears us down and makes us less conscious the next time, because we're so afraid of going into regret hell. So there is something for you in this. So let's say
Yeah.
you see how unfair it is to blame the you in that moment who did the best you could with the information you had. How unfair it is to keep using every single thing that comes after that against yourself. So, and any other decisions too, where you say, I regret that one now, and I regret that one. And we're leaving your own well-being, your ability to love and stand with yourself in the hands of external outcomes. It's just such a, these little parts of you were like, yeah, but we did the best we could in that moment. And you care more about all these external outcomes than you do about standing here with us, holding us, knowing we did the best we could, even if everybody else turns against you. Self-solidarity is you don't use hindsight as a cruel weapon of self-destruction. You can use it as a teacher to go forward and learn, but without all the self-hatred, because the self-hatred
Yeah.
does it keeps us repeating the problems. It's almost like life wants you to get to that place of self-solidarity and no matter whatness, and it'll keep bringing you that stuff until you do, and then decisions start to go easily, and outcomes aren't just black and white, good, bad. Over here, good outcome, yay, I did good.
Yeah.
Bad outcome, That's the mindset that life will keep trying to show you until you get this. So the second part, once you let's say that you've worked it enough, not all right here because we're time limited, that you do forgive yourself. So then you move on to step two. Step two, and again, this is all broken down, really the how of it in bullet points and written up much more in both the Wheel of Self-Love on the website, and we'll give you a button to go to that page, and then my book, the Spark of Self-Love, which is longer, and it's also there. And this is a deep study. Like I said, I have this new one is a 40 page. It was originally like 8, and it just got rewritten to be 40. Another one is 140. That's in our shop, The Spark of Self-Love. And I have a 350 page book called The Self-Solidarity Solution that will be coming out. So it is a deep thing to really look at this from all the angles, and it can really help to go in and just read those books and sit with them again. The first time you read The Spark of Self-Love, you thought it was really helpful, but it has changed a lot since then. And I don't know if you have read it in the context of all that's happened since then. So I hope you can go. Yeah. So anyway, then the second part is step 2. Why would you ever go into regret? It's because of fear. So okay, I've forgiven myself, but I still fear I have sabotaged everything is step 2. And that's right where you're at. You can kind of see the logic in your decisions along the way and stand with that but now it's the fear of what you've created that is really hard. And that's where sometimes we have to, well, what are you fearing around this? You may have a lot of other fears, but what is the fear that made you turn on yourself? Instead of saying, okay, well, that's what happened, and now we move on. Instead, you're turning on yourself, you're going backwards. What's the fear that created that?
I think somebody had said to me, well, I would have gotten, a confirmation email, making sure that they had gone after the settlement. That's what I would have done. Like,
yeah,
okay, I screwed up. I didn't do that.
Okay, so that's another one. Everybody who's in the habit of beating yourself up, like I always did, one of my biggest ones was beat myself up for something I hadn't even thought of. Well, how unfair is that? It's like,
right.
And I really work with that even now. I go, but wait, I didn't think of it. How can I hold myself responsible for something I didn't think of?
Well, and see, Shawn, that's part of it, is that what's wrong with my thinking? That's kind of like the over pervading question I have now with me is, what is wrong with my thinking? I look at all the people in this group. Have anybody else ever gotten into a scam, got caught? Has anybody else ever not, been in a lot of these situations that I'm in? It's like I keep having
say that there are some people who have made some pretty big, pretty regretful decisions. Some of the hardest ones that we've been able to work through are decisions made around the custody of children during a divorce. Children ending up with someone who was kind of abusive, and that person still having to find forgiveness for herself, and even if her children were angry at her for the rest of her life, she was in a desperate situation and made the best decision she could in that moment. And us really working through that started to change all her constant, probably 100 times a day almost, she was beating herself up for every little thing. It was just such a bad, and it was me too.
Yeah.
So there is some stuff going on with your thinking. And a year from now, after the mastermind group and working through a lot of that thinking, I would imagine a lot of it's that thinking is eclipsing. It's not just the regret thinking, but you've got a lot of thinking right now about all the things that are going wrong. So you're right. Maybe there is something but that's the question we're asking. What you're fearing is like an outcome. So I'm fearing that I won't have enough money. I'm fearing
Yes.
that I'll never recover from that. And what's interesting is you're kind of living that. So part of the step 2, if you go to the bullets, which we had all the bullets written out on another sheet, and we just made this sheet much more simple as a cheat sheet for people that have already, read the book and looked at it. But one of them is you first say, can I absolutely know? Like when it first happened, and you're like, oh my goodness, now I'm just going to go into financial ruin. And so you first ask yourself, can I for sure know that? And you get in touch with the fact that your mind does not have a crystal ball. You're still
Right.
living in your house, you're still surviving, you're still here with us. So on some level, that worst case outcome that your mind projected didn't happen, but you have your mind giving you lots of evidence for how it did and how the next decision drove you even further into financial ruin. And you've got sort of the everybody's worst
Right.
nightmare going
Well,
on
what's
here.
happening
So
is,
then you
yeah, you're
go,
right. Oh,
yeah, and so then you
I,
go ahead and say, can I absolutely know that any of this is a bad thing? First is, can it happen? Do I know for sure it's going to happen? And we say, well, no, I don't have a crystal ball. But in some cases, it already has happened. Like we might say, oh, I don't
right.
want that person to be mad at me. Like if we said
Well,
something
no,
and then we,
no. I mean, when you say, can it happen and it's already happening? Yeah. I mean, I am not
it is
able
and
to
it
buy
isn't. It is and
groceries.
it isn't. But I would imagine you started seeing yourself homeless in the gutter, which you still are seeing that, but you're not there. You're here. It's a lot of that worst case. So let's say even when it does happen. So just to use another example, if I would go into regret right after leaving a meeting at work, right after a conversation with almost anyone, I would go into thinking, and I have another client who was good that she found me because that was her thing too. And it made her afraid to speak up in meetings, but then she would beat herself up for not speaking up.
Right.
So either way, so if your story is that, oh, that person's going to be hurt, or that person's going to be mad at me, or they'll never speak to me again, or whatever. And we can say, can you absolutely know that's true? Or
Well,
that will happen. And I'm doing hypothetical now. I'm not asking you. I'm doing my hypothetical situation. So maybe that person has already told you they're mad though. So that first one doesn't always work. It's like, yes, you're saying it's already happening. And even if it hasn't happened, our mind will say, yeah, no, I don't have a crystal ball, but it could happen. So the safety in step 2, everyone, is that you go all the way to worst case scenario. Okay, we have to go all the way to you lose your house, you have no money, you're homeless. What are your worst fears?
well, I'm unable to pay my bills. I am,
Okay. And then
my,
after that, and what is out of that? Then what's the worst thing about that?
well, it's a progression. I don't have
Right. So bottom line, then take me all the way to worst case.
worst case.
I can't pay my bills, then I have
I
to
don't
sell.
know. I won't allow, it's like I won't allow my mind to go there.
Well,
And
that's part of where the fear is, guys. Once I started doing this, your mind is going there. I will tell you, or you wouldn't
yeah,
be in such regret already. You wouldn't believe all these things are so bad if there wasn't fear embedded that you're not actually acknowledging. When we bring it up and we say, okay, how can I know? I've seen Byron Katie do work with somebody that was about to become homeless. And by the time she was done, we were so excited about this homelessness prospect and what that would be like for this woman and how she would grow and how she would be able to serve other people out on the street. And it's almost like we all wanted to be homeless too at that point. So it's just that it depends on, this is where, if you're not seeing through it, you're not seeing that it's not necessarily a bad thing, then you do a whole judge your neighbor worksheet. And again, it's tricky for me because I don't have my bullets here on this simple
right,
one, but that is the last one. Is if you don't, you go do a whole thing, a whole full-blown piece of work. Is, can I absolutely know that even if my worst case nightmares come through, that that's a bad thing? Who are you to say what is being accomplished This is where our mind gets humble. And we've seen, Cindy, that there is a big resistance, which is why it's tricky. We're going into more private work, but your mind is still very resistant to shifting in these things. But when we do it, usually would say, okay, worst case, I lose everything. Can you absolutely know that that's a bad thing?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because I had to mute for a minute. I'm listening to you though. I've just had,
Great. Yes
I'm
or no?
struggling.
Can you absolutely know that that's a bad thing? We're not going to go into more other stories or justifications. This is a meditation. Can I absolutely know that if it goes to these worst case places, that that's not.
Yes, I
Yes.
feel that's a
Okay.
bad
So
thing
then
for
you
me.
would do that now. And then these are just a yes, no question. Then you would say, how do I react when I believe that thought? I walk around beating myself up. I'm in a lot of fear. I make more bad choices, whatever you get. Who would I be without that thought that there is something that goes all the way to? I
Yeah,
know that it seems radical, everybody, but most of what we're doing, yes, probably she won't go there. And I have one friend that's always living on the edge in a lot of physical pain, a lot of you know, inability to pay for the basic things that most of us pay for, right on the edge of that stuff. Even then, it's about the day-to-day quality of you are living here and now in this day. And I've watched this fear for years, and it's always out there in the future. She's still here. She's still in her house. It's always out there in the future. And yet until you work through it and say, no, I'm going to stand by and for myself no matter what. Because one of the things that's worse, when I lots of times I do with people, well, so what's so bad? What would be the worst thing about that? I can't pay my bills. Well, then I'm going to have to sell my house. Then I'll have to move away from this area and the people I love to live in a less expensive area. Then I won't be able to afford a place there. Then I'll be on the street, whatever. And when I say finally I get to, and what would be the worst thing about that? The answer is always that I would have only myself to blame. So when we get to the place where you don't have yourself to blame anymore, and you're just like, wow, what's going to happen next? Instead of, oh no, what's going to happen next? Something bad could happen because I've got so much proof here that bad things happen to me and I make bad decisions. Instead of this, you can't instigate that in your mind. But when you start really doing this work, you will be able to undo all the thinking that says, no, absolutely, I can't handle it if that happens. You can't know that. That's your projection on it. And there's all this fear is in the future. So this is what step 2 is. You actually get to the place where, you know what, bring it on, life, whatever happens. It's only my mind that's telling me that everything is happening bad now. And that is based still on these fearful projections into the future. And without that, I'm here, I'm fine, I'm taking actions one at a time. So this is a deeper piece of work because it is a huge situation that has all these pieces. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go through the rest of these steps. And if
okay,
Cindy,
that's good.
okay, so this is the Wheel of Self-Love cheat sheet that you will have in there. Anyway, and I'm sorry, I thought I had this on the screen the whole time. So you reconnect to your own innocence when you find yourself in regret, how you go back to who you were in that moment and ask yourself, what was I thinking? And when you do that, you can see that the lens you were looking through, you find that you were always doing the best you could. And in the other part, it adds, you find the spark of love underneath your motives. You find that you were always doing a motive to help yourself or another. And even if it seemed selfish or retaliatory, helping yourself felt like your job in that moment coming out of survival. So for me, that was the biggest step of all. This step 1 was like, wow, just like, okay, that was the best I could do in the moment. I can't go back in the past. I can't think something I wasn't thinking. It isn't fair to keep using hindsight as a cruel weapon of self-destruction. And then you go into, what am I fearing now? And the fear is what plunged you into regret. I'm fearing that person will be mad. I'm fearing I'll go bankrupt. I'm fearing, and therefore, if only I had blank back then, everything would be fine. And you use that to beat yourself up. So then you look at the fear, you get real clear, what is the fear? And you ask yourself, can I absolutely know that that's going to happen? And we will give you the more detailed version of it today. I'm afraid this is the first time we've used this pared down one, but it is also in the book, which I hope you'll just go out on the website and grab that. So yeah, you said, no, I can't absolutely know that this thing will happen. So far, it hasn't. Some of your worst case outcomes haven't happened, except for the judgment that they are bad. And then if you still can't go all the way to worst case scenario, it really helps to be able to do that. And you find, wow, some of the worst things that have ever happened. Cindy, this year, you may look back on this year and all the things that have gone on and that kept getting worse, 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 as one of the best turning points in your entire life, partly because it might have, brought you here to this work, to your ability to stand with, by, and for yourself, which will help your health and longevity. Our minds will always be able to find a bad outcome. They will always be able to find a way to blame or beat ourselves up or blame someone else if we don't get hold of this. That really is in some ways how aging happens, that our cells get reformulated to be receptors for anger chemicals, for shame chemicals, for regret chemicals, instead of, they're supposed to be a digestive cell. And they're like, oh, but we need more anger receptors. So that really is how aging happens. And so the more we believe, we work through these ways that our minds will turn on us, the happier we get to be and fearless for the rest of our life. So the last part is, be what you want from others or life. And that we need to fill in life on that purple part there. So if you still feel you need life or others to prove that you are okay, then you be your own hero. So what do you want from others or life? You want, well, life, it doesn't count. You don't get to go backwards. So if what you want from life is to go backwards and redo it, then I'm afraid the physics of it is that you don't get to have that part, but you can re-image it in your mind. You can re-image yourself as having done the perfect thing for that moment and being completely humble about all the other things that have been unfolding since then. Your mind will say, those things shouldn't be happening. Those things are bad. We can't know that. You don't know what's getting healed or accomplished in the grand scheme of things. So what you do think, okay, what do I want from others' life? I want to be prosperous. I want to be happy. I want to stop beating myself up. So don't wait for life to show up and make you feel prosperous. You feel prosperous in every moment with what you've got by questioning the thoughts that would say, I'm not prosperous. And so whatever this is, yours is vague, but lots of times if it's, for example, somebody's mad at us, what you want from them is, I want them to forgive me. I want them to see that I had their best interests at heart. I want them to give me a hug. I want them to keep our relationship going and not leave me. So you give all of that to yourself. You forgive yourself. You see your own best motives. You give yourself a hug. You don't walk away from that relationship with yourself. So this one is very clear when you think what you want from others, but what you want from life too. I want vibrant health and prosperity, even though this really horrible thing happened. Well, take out the middleman. Don't wait for the lawyer, even though he's still charging you interest. Okay, those are part of the facts. Until you do something to change that, it still is. So you get to say, okay, and within that, I'm going to get the most out of every single day and question any thought where this story about the lawyer keeps taking it away from me. I'm going to get those on paper till they are cooked, where I don't have to live day to day in hell about that past situation. And it really works. I know that you've got so many layers of it and your mind wants to switch right to the next one, but you can break these down, and you'll get to a place where you get to move completely forward. Also, watch how your mind is connecting everything that's happening now to all those past choices. Remember last night we talked about that's the T, the time. You're connecting things into the past, and you're going into the future. So remember, you guys, from the day 4 about the 4 thought types, future always puts you into fear. Past puts you into powerlessness. So you're sitting here in this beautiful present, feeling fearful and powerless. And also arguing with the present, which gives you resistance and anger. No, this shouldn't be happening. It is happening. Whatever is happening right now. Okay, it is happening now. What will I do? But it's hard to go to what will I do, because your mind wants to go into, oh, what have I done wrong that all these bad things keep happening? So sorry that I needed to skip forward, I think, between sound issues and the complexity of your situation. But I think it is good, though, that maybe people can see how it can work on even a really big situation. This is about your peace. This is about your freedom. Let's check in with anyone else. First, Allison, I always love your commentary. So did you have any takeaways or ahas to share, and invite others to just raise your hand and or put something in the chat?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what Cindy was saying about we are, and I think this is one of the, this might be one of the ones you talked about yesterday with one of the spiritual misconceptions, was that we do not want to let ourselves accept that we're going to these extreme worst case scenarios. But what I think, because what happens is the medium scenarios, like,
Okay, I'm here.
I'm going to lose my money and I'm going to have to sell my house, might be something that is realistic. But if we let ourselves go all the way to, I'm going to be homeless and eating out of trash cans, it starts to almost sound, and I don't mean to put down anybody's worst case scenarios, but then we can kind of go, wow, I'm really getting carried away here with how I'm projecting my future. And so by going all the way there, we can see, well, wait, is that, we can almost go to, well, is that really true? Is that the most likely thing that's going to happen? No, probably not. And we can kind of back ourselves up to maybe a closer fear and not end up really holding on to those extreme fears anymore.
But
Yeah,
it's a realistic
to that. Yeah, just a minute. There's 2 parts to that. Because yeah, the one is what you said, Allison, sometimes going all the way to worst case and accepting to ourselves that is, she said, I don't even want to look at that. But on some level, even if you put blinders on and you're not looking at it, we're kind of, if we're having survival fear reactions in our bodies, we are on some level going to those worst case places. And you can say, do I have a crystal ball? Can I absolutely know that can happen? Does my mind predict the future even 1 second from now? No. And you start to get a right-sized mind. That's what step 2 is about. And so then we still go, okay, but what if it does happen? And there's where the judgment, if it does happen, then that's the worst that could happen. That's the bad thing. Your mind will always go to that worst case and say, and then can you say, can I absolutely know that that's a bad thing? We've all had some pretty bad things happen that later we looked back and saw how they turned into something good. So that's the kind of logic you want to harness, that you may not even live long enough for this bad thing to happen. The bad thing may happen and it may turn into something good. And it is only your thought that says, I know it will be bad. And I've been hearing you say that, Cindy. I know this is bad stuff that's happening. We have to be willing to question the mind's judgment that anything is bad or good, because we're just not in charge of why anything's happening, what it means, where it's taking us. And when we open to that, then all those good outcomes start flooding in. And when we keep the no, all this bad stuff keeps happening to me, then instead of saying, wow, so that's happening, instead of it shouldn't be happening, we say, wow, that's happening, a new adventure. And what am I going to learn from that? And by that's how I've been able to get through a lot. So It's not, and it becomes, I say it's not easy, but it does become easy once you shift into that mindset.